Hello and welcome to Granada Reports, live with the latest across the northwest.
Hello there, thanks for joining us on the programme this evening.
Can you give me a big voice, Lauren? I know you can speak, you've got a beautiful voice.
A special report on the learning disability service that could become a blueprint to save billions for the NHS by keeping those in a crisis out of hospital.
We assess their needs in the community and then we develop an understanding around what led to the crisis, what could be done in the future to not let that crisis happen.
Rihanna Jai's mother tells an inquest her daughter was immersed in darkness and suffering with poor mental health before she was murdered.
Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve win a High Court harassment case against a conspiracy theorist who believes the Manchester Arena bombing was staged.
The Jurgen Klopp derby. Liverpool travel to Leipzig to face their German heroes' future club as he prepares to head up Red Bull Soccer.
Do you know, I have told you things I wouldn't tell my best mate.
How the RSPCA are looking for a pigeon enthusiast just like Jack Duckworth to give a group of lost homing pigeons a new home.
And it's been a bright and blustery day. It's set to turn slightly more unsettled as we head towards the weekend. I'll have all of the details coming up later.
So please stay with us for all of that. First, though, families say it's invaluable. Experts say it's vital. Tonight, a special report on the Greater Manchester Learning Disability Service that could become a blueprint to save billions for the NHS.
Tonight, we're able to give you an exclusive look behind the scenes of the UK's only residential assessment unit that supports young people aged 16 to 25 with learning disabilities and autism who are experiencing a crisis.
Staff at Radcliffe Place in Bury work tirelessly to support those with complex needs who so often would simply be admitted to hospital even when that isn't necessary.
And that's an expensive practice. More than 2,000 people with learning disabilities are currently being held in mental health inpatient units at a cost of more than £500 million a year. Anna Youssef spent time at the centre with the staff and those they support.
Can you give me a big voice, Lauren? I know you can speak, you've got a beautiful voice. Do you want to do it through your dolls? Can you do it yourself then?
Lauren struggles to express herself. She's autistic, has ADHD and a possible learning disability. The 23-year-old's a patient at Radcliffe Place in Bury, the only residential assessment unit in the country for young people like Lauren experiencing a crisis.
What was life like, Lauren, before you came here?
I think it was like, you know, it was a bit, it wasn't like, I was a bit isolated a little bit, and after isolated I felt on society.
You didn't feel like you were part of society?
No.
So would you just stay in your bedroom by yourself a lot?
Yeah.
And how did that make you feel?
It felt maybe a bit lonely and a bit sad.
The unit's aim is to reduce the number of young adults with learning disabilities admitted to hospital. Instead, patients are assessed for 12 weeks, have one-to-one care and therapy.
What we do here is we give the system a break when people are in crisis. We give them time and an understanding about the person. So when somebody comes in, we assess their needs in the community and then we develop an understanding around what led to the crisis, what could be done in the future to not let that crisis happen.
Clinicians here say people with learning disabilities are often misdiagnosed with mental health conditions and then wrongly medicated.
Somebody with learning disability would have poor communication skills. They would be having a poor understanding of what's happening in their world. They would self-talk to self-soothe themselves. And all these things present as somebody becoming very psychotic or somebody being very depressed. But in reality, they're actually responding to whatever is happening around them. Lots of people then get a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, those kind of things, and then end up in hospital.
What can be the implications for a person with a learning disability if they're prescribed medication for a mental health condition that they don't actually have?
It's an incredibly dangerous thing to do because people with learning disability already have physical health problems. On top of that, if you give them medication which they don't require, it could lead to their liver failure, kidney failure, and ultimately lead to their death.
Tell me, what is it you love about this place?
I think it's great.
Yes, I think so as well. And why do you think it's great?
Because we've got lots of stuff to do.
Sonny's 18, has learning disabilities and is severely autistic. His behaviour can be challenging and he's been hospitalised on multiple occasions. When he has a crisis, A&E is often the only option.
We went to the A&E. We were there about 11.5 hours before we'd seen anybody. And Sonny proceeded to smash things up. They put us in offices twice where he picked the computers up over his head and smashed them.
Sonny's father visits him every day at Radcliffe Place. He says he feels like he's got his son back.
It's a very calm environment. That would be the biggest thing. It's purposely designed to help people of Sonny's disposition, and that culminated with the lovely staff. Sonny's happy.
What do you think would have happened if Sonny hadn't got a place here?
I think he would have gone from pillar to post. He'd have had lots of relapses. Sonny needs the attention. Generally speaking, he can't say what he's feeling, what he wants to do.
The unit opened a year ago and currently has 4 beds. Patients are monitored 24 hours a day so the team can get a better understanding of their needs.
Communication is a real issue for a lot of the patients here, isn't it?
Yes, and that's where our assessment comes in. So it's kind of like looking at what triggers the behaviour, so what they're trying to communicate to us at the time. You know, and it might be how they're feeling, it might be, you know, are they in pain, or are they upset with something, or is it they're just bored, you know, and that comes out as a behaviour. So it's understanding what that behaviour is and how we manage that and what we can put in place of that.
And experts say this type of support has never been needed more. There are more than 2,000 with learning disabilities and autistic people currently being held in mental health inpatient units. It costs more than £500 million a year. The NHS pays for this, and on average, current patients are being locked up for almost 5 years. An NHS England review found almost half don't need to be in hospital at all. That would mean £18 million a month is spent from the NHS budget locking up people whose needs could be met in the community.
So Radcliffe's a good example of the kind of support that we need to see in every area of the country. So somewhere where if someone is in crisis in the community, they can go for a short period of time where they can get the support that they need, where the arrangements can be put in place in the community for them then to make a return back to their home. And that's what we want to see happen. We also need to see more early intervention services where, you know, we're supporting people before they reach crisis. Crisis is not a state that anyone should be left to get to.
Lauren recently moved into supported living. She's making friends, enjoying her independence and getting the support she needs to stay safe and be happy. Anna Yosef, ITV News.
Well, in a statement responding to that report, NHS England say the number of people with a learning disability and autism in mental health hospitals has been reduced by 30% since 2015 as a result of better personalised care in the community, but we know there is more to do to improve care.
It continues, the NHS will continue to ensure that patients are discharged into community settings safely and in a timely way, and that people are admitted to hospital only where necessary for mental health treatment.
And the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has told ITV News the state of mental health care is giving him sleepless nights. You can hear more on that in the ITV Evening News.
But joining us now is our political correspondent, Leisha McNally. We heard in Anna's report how much money is being spent by the NHS, Leisha. Is this something the government will be looking at?
Certainly is, and perhaps never more closely than this week. Not only is the NHS gearing up for winter and the additional pressures that brings, but Labour's gearing up for its first budget, a budget where we do expect to see a significant cash boost for the health service. But government's been clear that money must come with long-term reform, and this week it launched a consultation into what that reform could actually look like. It's been billed as the biggest national conversation in the history of the NHS, and it asks people about their ideas for 3 big changes in the way things things are run. Firstly, moving patient data online. Second, putting more focus on preventing ill health rather than just treating it. And third, a real move to shift care from hospitals to the community. And I think that's where we'll see the most innovative ideas. As we heard in Anna's report, there is a cost to keeping people in hospital who don't need to be there, not just to their own well-being, but to the taxpayer as well. So this could be a big saver in the long term. In the short term, it needs investment, it needs training, it needs staff. That means it needs money. So once again, it's all eyes on the budget next Wednesday.
Lots of eyes indeed. Leisha in Westminster for us tonight. Thank you very much.
An inquest into the death of Brianna Ghey has heard that the teenager had become immersed in darkness before she was murdered.
In a statement, Brianna's mother also said her daughter's mental health deteriorated massively during lockdown.
Brianna was stabbed to death by Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Radcliffe in Culcheth Linear Park last year.
The inquest, which began today, will examine why Jenkinson was put in the same class as Brianna at school.
Let's cross live now to Victoria Grimes, who's been at the hearing in Warrington. Vicky.
Well, Anne, Esther Ghey, Brianna's mum, wasn't in court today. Instead, a statement was read out where she described Brianna as a hyperactive child who had endless energy. But she later developed problems with her mental health, including an eating disorder for which she was hospitalised. She also told the court that when Brianna wanted to transition to female, she'd threatened to kill herself if she didn't get hormone medication. She later began taking puberty blockers and oestrogen. The hearing then heard how, as you say, Brianna's mental health deteriorated further during lockdown. Her mum described her entering a hole of negativity. She said she lived her life online and she looked at posts promoting self-harm and eating disorders. Esther Ghey said that when the police knocked on her door to tell her that Brianna had died back in February last year, she said she just knew something like this was going to happen. She said Brianna had changed from that child full of energy and joy to being a teenager immersed in darkness. I sometimes feel, she said, like I'm grieving for two different people. Now, the inquest also heard from a paramedic who was one of the first on the scene after Brianna's body was found. She said that in 21 years, it was some of the most traumatic injuries she'd ever seen, the worst she'd ever experienced.
So what else will this inquest be looking at over the next couple of days, Vicky?
Well, this is going to look at how Scarlett Jenkinson, who had been a pupil at Culcheth High School, was moved in what's known as a managed transfer because of her behaviour to Birchwood High School, where Brianna was a pupil. And the pair ended up in the same inclusion classroom. And one of the things that the inquest is going to look at is whether it could have been reasonably foreseen that this could have put Brianna at risk. And in the coroner's court today, Brianna's father, Peter Spooner, says he wants to know how that transfer was managed by both schools. The inquest also heard a statement from Alice Hemmings, the mother of Eddie Radcliffe. She described her son as a good child with good morals and a loving family behind him. He clearly knows right from wrong, she said, and is not a risk taker. She told how she drove her son to Culcheth on the day that Brianna died to meet Brianna and Scarlett Jenkinson. She said on the way he appeared tense and moody, not at all himself. He was constantly on his phone, she said. He wasn't himself at all, and I don't know why, but I felt uneasy that day. Well, both Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Radcliffe were jailed for life for Brianna's murder. The inquest here continues tomorrow.
Victoria Grimes at the Coroner's Court in Warrington. Thank you.
Two Manchester Arena bombing survivors have won their High Court harassment case against a former television producer who believes the attack was staged.
Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve, who both suffered life-changing injuries, sued Richard Hall for harassment and data protection over his claims in several videos and a book.
Mr. Hall claimed his actions were in the public interest as a journalist, but today a judge ruled they were negligent and reckless. A ruling on the data protection case will follow later this year.
Well, Mel Barham is here to unpack some of this for us. Mel, what more can you tell us? Well, Anne, let's explain a bit more about this case. As you say, Richard Hall, who describes himself as a journalist, claimed that the Manchester Arena bombing, which killed 22 people back in 2017, had in fact been staged and that the victims were actually unharmed crisis actors. Now, he'd specifically claimed that Martin Hibbert and his daughter Eve hadn't even been at the concert that night and didn't suffer their injuries there. In fact, as we know, Martin was the closest survivor to the bomber and suffered 22 shrapnel wounds and has been left paralysed from the waist down. His daughter Eve, who was just 14 at the time, has been left needing full-time care. She can't walk unassisted and she suffers from PTSD and depression. Well, 2 years after the bombing, Hall went to Eve's home, knocked on the door several times, knocked on neighbours' doors, and then secretly set up a camera in his car to capture footage of Eve in her wheelchair. In 2020, he then published a DVD and a book, concluding that the bombing had been a well-organised and well-planned fake terrorist incident. Well, Martin Hibbert took out a civil case against him, and in this landmark ruling, the judge, Mrs. Justice Steen, ruled that Hall's actions did surmount to harassment. She said that Hall had been blinkered in his beliefs and that his actions were oppressive, unacceptable and of sufficient gravity to sustain criminal liability. She said that Hall had repeatedly published false allegations based on what she called the flimsiest of analytical techniques, dismissing the obvious tragic reality to which so many ordinary people have attested. Well, Hall is also facing an allegation of misuse of private information and data protection breaches, for which the judge has still to make a judgment. A ruling on how much in damages Hall's going to have to pay and a possible injunction will be decided at a later date.
It is quite the judgment. What has Martin Hibbert himself had to say about this?
Well, Martin hasn't been doing any media interviews today. He's going to leave that till the next ruling. But in a statement, he says he's really pleased with the overall judgment, describing it as a comprehensive victory. And he says he wants this to open the door for change to help protect others from what they've been put through. And he intends to work with his legal team to call for a new law in Eve's name to be introduced. His solicitors, meanwhile, have called this a hugely important case, which they believe will now set a precedent, saying they hope it'll send a very clear message to those who think they have the right to publish absurd, harmful and unfounded allegations against others, that they will be challenged, they will be taken to court and they will be made to pay for their actions. Well, thank you. Doctors on the Isle of Man are to take a vote on strike action for the first time. The British Medical Association are asking for a 12% pay rise for their members rather than the 6% currently being offered. Manx Care say the salary increase is in line with offers to other members of staff and are committed to working with the BMA to resolve the dispute.
Now, you remember last night when we told you about 11-year-old cancer survivor Max McKelvey from Ellesmere Port. He needed to raise nearly £3,500 for a new buggy to help get him out of the house. Well, since we ran our report last night, get this, a staggering £14,928 has been donated. The charity New Life, who launched the appeal, so they're amazed by the response to Max's story and that every penny over the amount needed for his new buggy will go towards providing equipment for other disabled children.
Isn't that such good news among a sea of bad news all the time?
Yeah, amazing, amazing.
And here's what's coming up on the ITV Evening News at 6:30 with Mary.
Coming up in the programme, 3 people are found dead at a care home in Swanage. Dorset police say they are treating the deaths as unexplained, while 4 other residents are taken to hospital. In the US, Donald Trump accuses the Labour Party of election interference. And could your cat be smarter than your baby? Well, do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Cats are trying to take over the world personally, so they're pretty smart. On to sport now, and Liverpool are in Germany tonight taking on Jurgen Klopp's new club. Here's Chris.
Yes, his allegiances may be split as the club he made history with takes on the club of his future. Tonight, Liverpool face Leipzig in the Champions League just a couple of months before Jurgen Klopp becomes Red Bull's head of global soccer, working closely with Leipzig, among other clubs. It's also a big night for Manchester City as they welcome Sparta Prague to the Etihad, as David Chisnall reports.
Jurgen Klopp led Liverpool to become kings of European football in 2019. Tonight in the Champions League, his former club face one of his new ones as the Reds take on RB Leipzig.
I want to learn again.
Well, the German side is just one of the clubs that Klopp will oversee from the new year as Red Bull's new global head of soccer. And for one of his former players, it's a welcome return to the game.
Ich glaube, es ist schon anders.
Different job for him compared to being a coach. He needs to take care of many things, but I'm happy that he's back in football because such a name as he has, you can't forget, and you don't want to forget about him, and it's good that he stays in football.
Ist sehr gut, wenn im Fußball bleibt.
Liverpool are in Leipzig trying to make it 3 wins from their opening 3 fixtures in the Champions League's new league format.
If you would say to me, OK, tell me what you think about it, because I want to have an answer, I would tell you, OK, I like it, but that has only to do with us having 6 points out of 2 games. You can't ask for much more when it comes to results, but when it comes to what we want, there's always room for improvement.
Manchester City are also in action tonight at home for the first ever meeting with Sparta Prague. After so much success in recent years, Pep Guardiola is happy to see the hunger for more in his players' eyes this season.
How we celebrate it in October, not in May or April like it's happened. Still, I feel the team still have the passion, you know, how it's celebrating the locker room. I still feel okay, still they want it, still we are there, and that means a lot to me.
Among City's array of stars, local lad Rico Lewis is also starting to shine, with the 19-year-old starting all but one of their games this season.
In terms of my confidence, it's massive for it. To be able to have a manager like that can play you and feel like they can play you in most games is amazing for me.
Well, City should be confident of a win tonight at Fortress Etihad and extending their record unbeaten home run in the Champions League to an impressive 33 games. David Chisnall, ITV News.
Well, now to last night's action, and Preston say they're happy with the points despite losing a 2-goal lead against Norwich. North End scored twice inside the first 12 minutes at Deepdale, but had to settle for a 2-2 draw. In League One, Stockport thought they'd beaten Northampton with this late penalty, but conceded in injury time as the game ended 1-1. Bolton, Blackpool and Wigan all lost, but in League Two, Barrow earned a 1-1 draw with Notts County. Crewe moved into the playoff spots with a late 1-0 win at Fleetwood. There were defeats for Accrington, Morecambe and Tranmere, but Salford were 2-1 winners over Swindon Town. Now to boxing, and today Morecambe heavyweight Tyson Fury came face-to-face with Alexander Usyk for the first time since losing his world title to the Ukrainian back in May. He'll get a chance to redeem himself when they fight again in Saudi Arabia in December. But first came today's press conference in London, which is still happening as we speak. We will show you what Tyson had to say in tomorrow's Granada Reports. You have to be patient.
He keeps everyone waiting, doesn't he?
He does. Thank you, Chris.
We wouldn't criticise him, though.
No, absolutely not. Never in a million years.
Now to the tale of the homing pigeons who, well, can't find a home.
Do you think they know what they're actually called? Any idea? No, of course not. A flock of them have been rescued and are currently being cared for at the RSPCA Wildlife Centre near Nantwich, but there's a problem getting them their forever homes.
And if they can be found new homes, it would be a coup for all involved. I didn't write that, as Paul Crone reports.
You've every right to feel your feathers have been ruffled when you're a homing pigeon and haven't got a proper home. A flock of 18 racing and domestic pigeons have been rescued by the RSPCA after being found hungry and exhausted, and are now being cared for at the charity's wildlife hospital near Nantwich. Efforts to rehome them have got everyone in a bit of a flap.
Pigeons get a bad rap, I think, because they're so successful. They breed very well, they're very adaptable, and there are a lot of them out there. But like other species like foxes, they're kind of misunderstood. And I think we have to look at ourselves when we're kind of looking at problems with pigeons, in that the only reason pigeons are there is because someone's generally feeding them.
And you think it would be simple to reunite the racing pigeons with their owners, but that's not the case.
The problem with a lot of the racing pigeons that come in, the information on the tags isn't up to date. So we're trying to get in contact with someone that doesn't exist on paper. So that's when we struggle. There may be an original owner, but they may have moved on, their telephone's changed, and then we can't actually trace the new owners.
What the RSPCA is hoping for is a pigeon lover to take them in. Perhaps someone with the calibre of the late great Bill Tarmy, aka Jack Duckworth, who loved his feathered friends more than his wife Vera.
Do you know, I have told you things I wouldn't tell my best mate. Do you remember? Yeah. You kept it all to yourself, didn't you?
Whilst the gang are waiting to find their new forever homes, here are some homing pigeon facts. They can often do a journey of 1,100 miles in one go, and they can travel at speeds of up to 15 miles an hour, and when they're really going for it, 90 miles an hour.
They're just an easy bird to keep. They're very relaxed. Obviously, they're domesticated, but we're just looking for someone with that experience to be able to look after them for the rest of their lives.
And in the meantime, they can just dream.
They're off. The speed that these birds keep up is amazing, at an average speed of well over 40 miles an hour.
Paul Crone, ITV News, Cheshire.
Did he really just say 90 miles per hour for a pigeon?
He needs to watch out on the M62 between junction 10 and 11.
Let's get the weather. Here's Louise.
Why do I need a shower? I've been out in the rain.
The faster you go, the sooner you'll be out. You'll save water too.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Hello there, good evening. It was a rather bright but blustery day. We will continue to hold on to quite strong winds as we move through the overnight period. Tomorrow though looks like a largely settled day, sunny spells, mostly dry, but we will hold on to the breeze through the first part of the day. Taking a look at the bigger picture, high pressure has moved off to the southeast. We have a weather system pushing through from the Atlantic over the next couple of days, bringing some wet conditions our way. There's a squeeze in the isobars there, indicating strong blustery winds at times. Tonight remaining fairly blustery, especially across the Isle of Man, where we could have some coastal gales through the early hours. It's a largely dry night and quite cloudy for most, temperatures holding up between 9 and 12 degrees Celsius, so fairly mild despite the winds. Tomorrow, again, a blustery start. Winds will continue to blow in quite strong through the first part of the day, easing off into the afternoon. Some bright and sunny spells developing too, with patchy cloud, remaining dry with a top temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. Looking ahead towards Friday, we can see that weather system starting to slowly move through. Some showery outbreaks of rain at times, and the winds quite brisk. Temperatures down a few degrees, highs of just 14 degrees Celsius. Looking ahead then towards the weekend, rather changeable and unsettled, with wet and sometimes windy conditions coming our way and temperatures slowly starting to trend down. That is the very latest. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye for now.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Granada weather.
Thanks, Louise. That is it from us so far today, but there's more on our website.
I'll be back with the late news after news at 10. Until then, have a great night.
Bye-bye.